Okay.
Good idea now, but I like it. It's alright. Little darling, your smiles fit right into their faces. Little darling, it seems like years since it's been.
To 12 Arnold Grove in Wavertree in Liverpool. My name is Samira Ahmed. I'm a journalist and a broadcaster, and I think I speak for many when I say I grew up under the spell cast by George Harrison and the Beatles, and the dreamland of Liverpool that inspired him, inspired them, and through them has inspired people around the world. When I was 10 years old, a distant cousin of mine, a merchant seaman, an Indian merchant seaman, gave me George Harrison's 1978 album called George Harrison and said, oh, George Harrison's a friend of mine, and he gave me this for you. And it seems appropriate that there was something of the tall storytelling about how I got that record. And I remember studying the cover for cultural references and clues that showed that my cousin Ravi really did know George Harrison. And there was this great mystery about him. And there was the music, there was the cultural references to India. And I think back to my whole childhood, the music that he created, his own wide presence in films, but his own contribution to films. The film director Bruce Robinson told me how essential George Harrison was to making With Nair and I, one of the greatest of the many great British films that George Harrison enabled through handmade films, Monty Python's Life of Brian, Time Bandits, to name two others. Culturally, he embodied and embraced everything that made post-war Britain exciting, drawing inspiration from George Formby and ukuleles, sooty and sweep, and crucially, Indian culture, which was hugely important to children like myself growing up in the 60s and 70s, that his open-mindedness and his embracing of Indian culture at a time of racial intolerance made so many of us think again about our own parents' culture. I know that George Harrison felt mixed about school and authority, but at this house he was happy. And I know in his autobiography, I Mean Mine, he wrote, "It was okay, that house. It was very pleasant being little, and it was always sunny in the summer." There is something hugely inspiring about this little boy with a passion for guitar who travelled across the cities, Paul McCartney told me, to learn a single new chord that he'd heard about. He modelled excellence with such single-mindedness. I can't help wondering how he'd really be thinking about the idea of a blue plaque on this house, but I hope the approval of a blue plaque would make George Harrison smile wryly. I'd now like to welcome, well, we're going to hear from Olivia Harrison shortly, but let me welcome Duncan Wilson, Chief Executive of Historic England.
Hello everyone, and on behalf of Historic England, thank you Liverpool, thank you Arnold Grove for giving us this fantastic opportunity to launch our Blue Plaque scheme outside London. Long overdue that we had blue plaques all over England, and I think this is just such a great example because I know George Harrison was really connected to this place, and it is all about the connection between people and places, and I can't think of a better example of that than number 12 Arnold Grove. So on behalf of Historic England, thank you so much. Do join in with nominations to our national scheme, which opened today on our website, and over to Olivia to say some more personal introduction. Thank you.
1966. Thank you to the Mayor and Lord Mayor, MPs for Wavertree and Liverpool Riverside for being here with us today. You know, pride is not a word that, you know, I would attach to George, because he didn't have that sentiment, but we're so proud of him, and I think he would be too. Because there are some honors you can imagine, you know, or dream of receiving. If you're an actor, you may see yourself holding an Oscar, a musician, a Grammy. But no one imagines that one day their birthplace will be marked in recognition of who they were as a person or what they've done. In fact, in 1995, after the Beatle anthology aired on national television and revived another moment of Beatlemania, he said to me, "Well, I guess it's not going away." I said, "No, George, it's not going away. In fact, the further away from the Beatle phenomenon that time takes us, the more certain their incredible legacy will forever be linked with Liverpool." It is also evident that George was born in a city that encouraged him to become who he was meant to be. When George spoke about Arnold Grove in his book, I Knew Mine, he was describing his first memories in an unsure world, a world that literally shook his infancy. The bombs, the sirens, hiding under the stairs inside his house with his mother Louise and his brother Peter. But also a secure world because his nan was down the alley in Arnold Grove and he could run to visit her all on his own. Maybe the cozy quarters of Arnold Grove was why the Harrison family was so tight-knit. There's a specialness about living in such close family quarters. I know, we were 7 in 3 bedrooms. One of them was our parents. We learned to trust each other and respect the space of one another. And yet, once out of his cocoon, George's metamorphosis was immense. Yes, he migrated south and west and east. But his star was in the north. And his values were established here. And his dreams began here, where he listened to music and stories on the wireless with his mom. He was interested in all forms of alternative music and philosophies. Maybe he was influenced by the diversity of this port city that brought flavors from afar, rock and roll from the West and ragas from India. He was not blind to the suffering of others in faraway places. Former Secretary General of the United Nations, Kofi Annan, said George was a pioneer. He used his fame to mobilize the forces of rock and roll for the sake of others. He established a charitable foundation in 1973 that still helps others at home and beyond these shores. He grew up where he could see the horizon. I think that is what gave him the longing to find out more about the world outside and the world within. When we traveled and on tour, he became Mr. Arnold Grove, and I was Mrs. Arnold Grove, and Danny was Albert Grove. And when destiny took him from here, he took the name of this cul-de-sac with him, and we are filled with gratitude and pride that you have brought George Harrison's name back home. He and his music left a footprint on this world, on this country, on this great city, and on the cobblestones and pavement of 12 Arnold Grove. Thank you. I'm also so happy that George's family, Irene Harrison, is here today with Janet Harrison, George's brother, George's sister-in-law, she'll give you a good talking to. Thank you.
you don't know him, you think who's this madman, who's this lunatic?
Just watch the roll out.
Yeah, thanks, buddy.